So I'm in a bit of a flight sim twilight zone, not been doing too much simming at all. Flight Sim 2020 isn't really progressing at the moment because there's too many things holding it back, or holding me back from adopting it wholesale. Now I have set things up to dual boot, so I can drop back into P3D by booting into Windows 7 and running as before. Although that's getting a bit more fiddly at the moment, it's looking like that's not going to be possible. Realistically speaking, I'll say why in a little while. Although it has to be said that, you know, the urge to go into P3D really isn't there, having looked at Flight Sim 2020, and such simming as I've been doing has been largely in 2020, despite the drawbacks. The things that are getting in the way are, you know, for now it's looking increasingly likely we're not going to be able to get this kind of cockpit set up in FS 2020, not for the foreseeable future. Certainly the triple screen setup isn't going to be possible unless Asobo does something about that specifically. And I mean by adding something like the view groups that we have in P3D. Next thing that's getting in the way is the ability to map all my buttons and switches. A couple of problems here. The main one is the SDK has got gaping holes in it, and at the moment I can't use the GPS at all without resorting to the mouse, and doing it in the cockpit with the mouse is just absolutely fiddly. It's just not worth the trouble. You know, the real solution to that is for Asobo to implement those functions in the SDK. Now it is possible in some sense to hack those functions, and I know that because it's been done. I know two instances of it having been done. One is the Real Sim Gear GPS product and their G1000 system. They have managed to hack something that allows certainly the GNS 530 to work with the default Flight Sim 2020 aircraft. And actually those Real Sim Gear panels look pretty damn good. You know, I did think about buying one of those. That's maybe for the future. There is a DIY option which is MobiFlight, which is a product you may have heard of. That is now reported to have a hack that allows full functionality with the GNS 530 and the GNS 430. The problem with that is that MobiFlight is a system that requires you to be running your hardware using an Arduino, and I don't use Arduinos, I use the Leo Bodner boards. So I would have to create a new GPS panel built around, or somehow hack my existing panel to connect up via an Arduino Mega instead of the Bodner board. Of course the instrument panel, which runs off Air Manager, I don't think I can get that working yet, but that's okay, it's for the future. They are working on it, that's the important thing. Meanwhile, there is another thing that's come to my attention, which is kind of a, you know, a halfway house if you like. There's a thing called Class Echo, which is a hardware device. Well, you can't actually buy it, it's a kit. You have to buy the various parts and then assemble the kit. It's built around an Arduino, but it's a kind of a all-in-one, well, or lots in one touchscreen solution with a single knob that operates rather like the Knobster concept, whereby you can display, for example, your radios on screen, and then you can touch the thing that you want to adjust and then adjust it with the knob. That product looks quite promising as a stopgap measure, or possibly as a long-term measure, because it's quite fully featured. It gives you, among other things, access to the radios, the autopilot, or a whole bunch of other stuff. It's by an outfit called Shakeprint, or a guy called Shakeprint Simulations. So I may look at that. I'm going to close out this video, if you stay watching, with some comparisons of the environment and the scenery to some of the stuff in P3D, particularly along some of the route of my abortive round the world trip, and even more particularly in the areas that were very much lacking, even with the Orbix FTX Global products installed. So a couple other things about Flight Sim 2020. The main thing that's holding me back, which is associated with the cockpit wiring up, is there's a, I mean, I have to say that FS 2020 for me is fairly robust to date, but there is one, since the Christmas update, there is one reliable crash to desktop, and that is if I go into the controls setup dialog, crashes immediately, and that just started happening with the latest update, and I've discovered a reason for that, or I've seen reported the reason for that, which is there is a maximum number of controllers that you can connect, and that maximum is, well, it's cited as 10, but it's really only 8, because FS 2020 counts the mouse and the keyboard as controllers. Now, given that I've got 8 Bodner boards plus a yoke, a throttle quad, another throttle quad, a Cytec trim wheel, rudder pedals, I don't know if I missed any out, that's far too many, that's over 10. And now previously this was a problem. I mean, now this sheds a bit of light on what I felt was an instability before. You might remember, or I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not, when I first plugged in this alpha yoke, although it popped up on the screen as being detected, when I went into the controls setup dialog I couldn't find it, so I couldn't program it. The reason for that is this problem, which now causes a crash, was previously a silent problem, so it would only show you the first 10 controllers in the control setup dialog. Now this means I can't, well, first of all, I can't go into the controls setup dialog at all, so I can't program anything. The only solution to that is to disconnect a bunch of my panels or various devices. Now to do that obviously undermines my dual booted prepared installation. So I'm loath to start fiddling with that unless I'm going to decide to make the jump to FS 2020 wholesale, which I'm probably going to do before long. I'm hanging on to this twin otter thing just because it hangs together still as a coherent whole. So at the moment, until they fix, I mean, they've got to fix that, for God's sake. For most people these days, 8 devices plus a keyboard and a mouse is a fairly artificial and quite constraining limit, and it would mean I couldn't have all my panels active. So that's a very big deal, and that really conspires with the other big deal, which is the inadequacies of the SDK. Actually, the SDK doesn't allow access to LVARs yet either. I'm saying yet, I mean, I'm hoping that's on the horizon. If it's not, I mean, it's just death to this as a simulator for people who want to take it seriously. So we hope that's going to be implemented sooner rather than later, ideally. And the last piece of the jigsaw is I am eagerly awaiting Aerosoft's development of their Twin Otter for FS 2020. That development is real, it is definitely underway. They have showed a number of screenshots to date. I don't know where they are, how far they are down the line, but once that comes out we can start to take the sim seriously. There are a number of third-party aircraft starting to appear. I haven't bothered with any of that so far. So there it is, that's my flight sim Twilight Zone. But for now, let's just jump in and have a look at some of those comparisons of the new environment from FS 2020 along some of the route of my abortive round the world trip. And really it's comparisons such as this that are keeping this dream alive. If they can sort out these things that I've talked about with 2020, it's going to make an absolutely just stellar flight sim. Again, the one thing it's got going for it above all else is the open world nature of the environment, but also the rendition of the environment, which is just so far ahead of anything I've seen in Prepared that it's worth hanging out for.